Hello, students. Uh, let's move to the next thinker, perhaps the most important for our ethics paper, and that is Immanuel Kant. So he's a German thinker, and is considered one of the one of the most influencing philosophers in Western philosophy. The status of Kant is very high in Western philosophy. Like generally, it is considered that um, the way Aristotle was considered encyclopedic genius of his time. After Aristotle, the most influencing and most revolutionary in a way philosopher was that of Kant. And there are many reasons for that. It is also said because the philosophy that Kant gave was very kind of revolutionary, or bringing out some very new and original points, in even if he did not create any metaphysics, but still his way of looking at things, his way of critiquing things is considered to be the most uh, kind of influencing on the minds of Western thinking. So basically, before going uh, into the ethical aspect that Immanuel Kant talked about, briefly, let's discuss about what was his overall um makeup of his things, overall thinking style, which automatically you'll understand how his ethics got impacted by that particular thing. So, briefly, before Kant, there are three things that we need to consider. One is in the among the philosophers and thinkers of that time, it was very difficult, at least philosophically and otherwise in society also, to have thoughts, to have philosophies that are centered in ultimate reality. Okay. Now, most of the, for all practical purposes, this ultimate reality will be God. So, what happened before Kant? All philosophers, either they established the concept of God in different ways, like considering God as some power, some reality, some conscious power, some like God, as if God is some kind of a person, whichever way. And obviously, that got translated to God being there as a regulator, because when it comes to ethics, okay, ethics means there is do's and don'ts, very, uh, you know, layman's language I'm talking about. And these do's and don'ts would be regulated by some energy, some entity that will be God. So what happened? It was almost getting established because of the kind of philosophies people were giving, where knowledge is considered to be a source from outside. That is simply, if I know something, means I get that knowledge. That knowledge process starts with, depends rather with, on the things outside the person. And because of that, though it was not very well uh, kind of rationally explained, but the concept of God was there across the board. And then it was a kind of an easy window, easy entity to attribute anything that you cannot attribute to normal life, be it infiniteness, be it all powerfulness, be it all mercifulness, okay, be it all all intelligence, that is omniscient being and something like that. So point is, though we cannot see and touch and feel and anything about God, yes, we have some intuitive inclination toward God, towards God. So God must be there. We may not be having that faculties to understand it, but in a way, it was almost getting established that the source of ethical values is coming from God. Now, why, you need to understand one thing, why the source of ethical values has to be always kept in something where you need to have some kind of faith, in the sense every now and then you should not be able to question it. Every now and then, some or the other time, when everybody sits together and discuss, that's another story. But because unless it is uh, that rigid, it is very difficult to actually follow in our day-to-day life. Means, when you actually, for example, honesty is what you should be. If you don't, there should be some punishment. That punishment, who will decide? Because most of the time you are dishonest, and you are the only person who knows that you are dishonest. So who will regulate that? Okay. Sorry. Sorry. So what happened? The entity called God was created, which which was kind of communicated to the general masses as if something which can actually harm your life in future. So there is some conscious entity sitting there. You better behave yourself. You better follow some ethics. So this concept of God, philosophically, metaphysically, and obviously ethically, got established a lot in a very rigid way, and that's why what happened. It was considered that source of all ethics and morality is coming from the God. Okay. Obviously, then impact of Christianity, Judaism, religions basically. Religion is what? Religion is the same kind of organized system for this faith system, where you have some central entity and you are required to have a faith, and it is generally considered that this central entity is going to kind of reward you if you follow ethical dictums, and would punish you if in case you deviate from it. So because of that continuous fear, it is considered that people will follow the ethical code, and it happened. Obviously, it happened for some time. But what happened then? This is one aspect, that is how philosophy, how metaphysics, reality, knowledge of reality and things like that, everything impacted the development of ethics, perspective of ethics, the version of ethics. So basically, before Kant, it was said that it was almost established that the source of ethical moral behavior is in God, or some kind of that kind of entity. Now, the peripheral qualities and properties and nature, appearance of the God might be different. If you are a Christian, your God would be different. If you are Muslim, your God would be different. If you are Hindu, your God will be different, something like that. Or if you're Jew, or if you're Parsi and all that. Point is, you will have something called God, and that God, gives you that commandment kind of thing, some ethical dictums kind of thing, which you have to follow. That was a kind of a easy thing, because everybody had to believe it, because everybody from that community at least had to believe it. But meanwhile, there were also other social issues, social developments, and other developments happening in science. Other developments are happening in, like, two civilizations, two different gods clashing with each other. So this faith system is a very complex thing. It's a psycho-emotional, economical. It's a club together. It's the way in the kind of complexity these faith systems had created, including economy also revolving around God, scientific development revolving around God. All these cultural aspects were revolving around gods. Your even your food, your clothing, everything was decided around God, and obviously your ethics were decided around God. Even Plato uh, and Aristotle also did not deny God, and it is generally said that the impact of Plato and Aristotle was there completely on Christianity. So the kind of God Plato was talking about, he did not mention that as God the way Christianity later on did it, but it is said that it's a impact of Plato and Aristotle over Christianity, and because of the Christianity, then it continued, because then it became organized system, which very difficult to deviate away from. But as I said, a lot of scientific development started, and a lot of other social things started happening. Because of that, and scientific development, basically because of that, people like philosophers, thinkers started thinking afresh about it. In this context, what happened, you know, Kant, like for example, Kant had a different perspective, different vision of things. So initially, this initial understanding was like this: मान के चलो, this is like a human being, and there is world around him, right? Now it is considered that world has something which comes to this thing, and because the world is there, you know it. In the same way, in the world there is something called God also, and that God is giving you dictums and all that. So whatever we are following, like we have an inclination towards being honest, whether you will be able to do it or not, but generally nobody says that honesty is a bad policy as far as the dictum is concerned. Everybody says that it's a good policy, everybody should follow. Whether they will be able to follow or not, that's another story. But in the metaphysics, in the epistemology of Kant, he took it in a different way. That is, according to him, whatever knowledge we are getting is not exactly what the reality is, but it is the way we modify the reality during the process of knowing. So there is something inside us which actually creates the knowledge, okay, which actually gives some color, some taste, some tone to the knowledge, which we understand as knowledge. We don't have any capacity to know things as it is. Basically, what he said is, even whatever knowledge of this chair or anything outside is heavily influenced by our own faculties, okay. And now these faculties, he is not talking about subjective knowledge, that is, knowledge for you is different, knowledge for me is different, not that. He says all human beings have something in common. That's why that particular aspect, that faculty that he was talking about, are conceptualized by him as objective faculties, because they are there in everyone in a same way. So it's not a subjective thing. Like, I see it in different way, you see in different way, not like that. So these are some objective faculties, right? So basically what happened is, he gave an analogy, like, for example, we have something like this, okay. This is a kind of pattern. Pattern means एक, इसको सांचा बोलते हैं, ओके। सांचा है, तो इसमें यहाँ पे मिट्टी है, तो अगर हम इसमें मिट्टी डालेंगे, प्रेस करेंगे, तो we'll get bricks, right? And the shape of the brick will be exactly what the sacha will guide it. So what he says, basically, this is like the reality outside, this is like our mind, and this is what our knowledge. So our knowledge is basically heavily impacted by our own categories of understanding. He gave this name that there are 12 categories, but वो इतना जरूरी नहीं है, हमें बस ये रखना कि according to him, there is something called categories of understanding. So he said there is some process happening here because of our reasoning ability, reason, okay. We are still discussing his philosophical aspect. We are yet to come the ethical part. So he says, whatever reality it is, whenever we know it, we actually, change it according to our need, and then only we can know it. We cannot know it just like that. ये जैसे मिट्टी है मान के चलो, so we cannot use मिट्टी for making house. We have to use brick, and for that we have to make it go through this compartmentalization, which will make it in the form of knowledge here. So these categories of understanding, he says, every human being has these categories of understanding in him or her. And it is same. There are 12 categories, but as I said, that's not important for us, just for knowledge I'm saying. So there are different philosophical aspects are there. So through these categories of understanding, you know something, number 8. Number 2, these categories of understanding are, he uses that word a priori, again technical. What he's trying to say is it cannot be changed. It's like in the whole process, like आप इससे भले 10,000 ईंटें बना लो, you can make 10,000 bricks out of it. This will not change. The pattern will remain the same. You can keep on doing it. There will be some repair here and there, but ultimately pattern is not going to change when the bricks are getting done. Bricks, this clay is getting transformed into bricks. Pattern is remaining the same. So he says these categories of understanding is kind of fixed, hardwired in our mind. ठीक? And that is because of reason. So these categories of understanding means we have the different categories, means this is the product of our reasoning ability. Human being can reason, that's the reason, or that's the cause we have knowledge, and that reasoning happens to 12 categories of understanding, just mentioned categories of understanding. So this is hardwired, this is fixed, you cannot change it according to Kant. Now he says whatever our ethical inclinations, he doesn't say, he doesn't agree to the point that our ethics is what society has taught us. It's not coming from outside. So according to him, the inclination towards morality, inclination towards right, segregation capacity of right and wrong, but inclination towards right is inherent, hardwired in us. Now, please don't misunderstand that each and every singular thing, whether that particular thing will be considered right or wrong, that will be same for human being. No, he is not talking about whether the caste system will be considered right or wrong, because then that's a different story. What he says, that there is a basic understanding, basic concept that we cannot help ourselves but categorize everything into either right and wrong. So this process of categorizing is inherent. He is not saying that this particular aspect is always considered right by everyone. He is not talking about murder is wrong. He is not talking about stealing is wrong. He is not talking about compassion is right. He is not talking about individual values, individual behaviors to be fixed as right and wrong. He is not talking about considering caste as wrong only or right only. He is not talking about individual instances and behaviors to be fixed with its value. He is talking about the very capacity to have that process in you. To actually have this process of whether it is called right or wrong, that is inherent in us. So any action that comes in front of us, somewhere we have this process of judgment. Okay, moral judgment. So anything, and this is according to him, this process is inherent. You cannot help but actually have judgment about whatever you see, and whenever there is another human being involved, we consider that as, according to him, it's hardwired in us. So we, in a way, involuntarily, without our permission, tend to actually categorize these two either right or wrong. Okay, so his main point is our ethics is not flowing down from God or anything else, but it is coming from our own categories of understanding. Okay, So what he says is that because of these categories of understanding, we have this faculty which forces us 100% times, always, invariably, to categorize anything into either it is right or wrong. Okay, so his point is this particular category will generally forces you to have some judgment about the act, that is the act was right or wrong, good or bad, should I do it, should I don't not do it. So this you can say it like a binary thinking, but yes, it is. Point is this faculty of right and wrong is there in us. How to understand this? Please compare these things with animals. Any animal, you take an example of dog. Dog doesn't have concept of right thing or wrong. He has his own instinctive uh, hormonal instinctive compulsive things. भूख लगी थी वो खा लेगा, एंड वो स्मेल करके सूंघ के स्निफ करके डिसाइड करेगा कि ये खाने लायक है या नहीं है. ओके, if some other dog is attacking him, वो प्रोटेक्ट करेगा, अटैक करेगा, जैसे भी. There is nothing called right and wrong among animals. There is nothing called right and wrong in uh, animal world other than human being. Right and wrong is the concept of human being, and that, according to Kant, is coming from the capacity to reason. So that's why he says the reason is the source of right and wrong. Reason is the source of morality. Okay, this reasoning is the source of morality, and we have some categories in us because of which this morality is coming out in different ways. Now in this category, what kind of clay you will put, accordingly the bricks will be made. तो कौन किस टाइप की मिट्टी डालेंगे उसके हिसाब से आपका bricks change होंगे, but you will be having some or the other kind of category or some categories of understanding, and these categories of understanding are same in everyone, which, as I said, forces you to categorize everything as right and wrong. What happens then is this is happening inside the individual only. So this individual, through these categories, without his permission, invariably, involuntarily, puts on himself some obligations, some imperative. Okay, imperative means what? Kind of something that you have to do. It's an imperative. It's imperative to do it, or obligation. Okay, you are obliged to do it. It is again, it is according to Kant, it is hardwired in us. That is this particular sense of नहीं यार मुझे ये करना चाहिए, I have to do it because otherwise वो अच्छा नहीं है, like it doesn't seem. So it's not coming from culture. Yes, details of it are coming from culture. मिट्टी आपको कल्चर से मिल जाए, but categories आपको अंदर ही है. It's not coming from outside. It's not coming from which culture you are, what you have been told, what you have been taught. According to Kant, modern human being में से किसी को भी आप बचपन से जंगल में छोड़ दोगे and you make sure that the animal, that human being lives, even if in that case, because of the categories of understanding, the person will have his or her own ethical system, even if he is staying in jungle since childhood. मोगली जैसा कोई हो जाए या टार्जन जैसा भी, according to Kant, उसकी फिर भी क्योंकि वो रीजन है, हार्डवायर्ड है, वो अपना एथिक्स डेवलप करेगा ही करेगा. That's what his point is. Though the person won't be very fine, refined and all नहीं होगा, लेकिन फिर भी there would be, because there is a category, there are categories of understanding, so there will be some imperative that he will be putting on himself, some obligation he will be putting on himself. So हमारा जो हमारे खुद के माइंड का एक मॉनिटर हमेशा बैठा रहता है. We always have a kind of CCTV inside us monitoring our own behavior and telling every time अच्छा किया, बुरा किया, ये मत करो, ये मत करो, creating some or the other imperative for you. ये करो, करना ही पड़ेगा. That is sense inside you. और ये करो, ये मत करो. There is some kind of obligation, and that's why this categories and this kind of obligation or this kind of imperative, according to Kant, is called categorical imperative. Categorical imperative. Or there is one more concept given by Kant, that is moral obligation. Moral obligation, and which results in moral judgment. These three words, imperative, obligation, judgment, are very frequently used by Kant to explain his concept. So his whole concept is human beings have something called categories of understanding which are hardwired in them, which compels every human being from inside to follow some path, to avoid some path, to follow some behavior, to avoid some behavior, to the concept of categorical imperative. The imperatives flowing down from the categories of understanding. That's why he calls it categorical imperative. It's a kind of moral obligation. Now, moral means under say, in fact, for Kant, moral means it is something that is coming from inside. Now, this may happen that it may not agree to what is happening outside. It may agree to what is happening outside. But point is, it is basically coming from inside, right? And moral judgment is the property of mind that you cannot stop. Everything that the mind is perceiving, receiving, mind will have some or the other judgment about it. Okay, so the basic reason why Kant is very important is, now what happened, the source of ethical values, source of this ethics and morality, according to Kant, was taken away from the God or outside something and made human centric. Okay, and not just human centric, he made it like a priori, that is, आप चेंज नहीं कर सकते, इनहेरेंट होता है, हार्डवायर्ड होता है, you cannot help it. So everybody has this sense, okay, everybody has this process in them through which these things will be regulated, अंदर से regulated. It's a regulating from inside. This regulation, this process creates in every human being something called conscience or conscience. Conscience. So everybody has this something called conscience. Conscience is just a name given to this whole process, basically, and somehow label it is labeled it in the form of some kind of property that the mind and whatever soul, whatever you want to call it, inside human being has. Mind बोल दो for time being, thinking. And what is this conscience? Then this conscience is the process, is the faculty inside you, kind of a compass, which actually tells you what is right and what is wrong. तो वो right and wrong की तरफ बता देगा for each and everything. It's like a compass. That's why conscience is like a compass. And this conscience is a product of categorical imperative, this sense of moral obligation, okay, which through the conscience gives you some moral judgment, and you will be everything that you do will be monitored, like as if there is some CCTV inside you all the time, 24/7. No need to have any God. Initially it was considered that God is watching you, so please behave. Now he is putting the point that it's like it is from inside, you cannot help it, and that's how everybody actually is ethical, and you cannot be but ethical. Now obviously there will be conflicts, Conflicts as in this is coming out of reason, right? But there is something called passions, instincts, passions, instincts, desires, emotions. These things have a negative impact in this context, ethical context, on reason. And these get created because of the practical situations. So even if somebody knows very well that thing is right, he or she would be also kind of compelled by some of the other aspects like emotions, passions, instincts and all to follow something which is wrong. But then how would Kant explain this? That there is a reason and there is passion. Now reason is kind of pushing you towards something called right thing, and passions are pulling you away from right thing and maybe pushing you towards wrong thing. So that conflict goes on. But what Kant says is, if this compass, if you've done something wrong, conscience has one important aspect here, and this is called concept of guilt. He says कॉन्शियस मतलब हम बोलते हैं कि जमीर, मेरा जमीर मुझे ये काम करने की इजाजत नहीं देता, मीन्स माई कॉन्शियस वोंट अलाउ मी टू डू समथिंग लाइक दैट, एथिकल नहीं है. तो सेंस ऑफ एक गिल्ट आता है. गिल्ट क्या है? गिल्ट इज अ वेरी नेगेटिव, uncomfortable, uneasy experience inside you. I won't call it emotion only. It is emotion also, but it is a negative, unpleasant experience inside you. So guilt is always an unpleasant experience. Guilt is unpleasant. Guilt is unpleasant experience. So this unpleasant experience actually forces you to follow. So basically the reward mechanism is inside only. Okay, so what he says that our natural tendency is toward right, but because of the impact of many outside things, you may tend to do wrong thing, but then there will be a guilt. Now even the thought of doing something wrong creates guilt, and I'm pretty sure that almost you, everybody of you might have experienced this. कुछ अगर आपको खुद को गलत लग रहा है और कर रहे हैं, आपको लगेगा कहीं ना कहीं अंदर से. Now sometimes what happens, the passions, instincts, desires and emotions are very strong, so you actually do it and you don't realize anything at that point of time. Later on you realize that it was a wrong thing and you start feeling bad about it, something that you already done, and then you're feeling very bad about it yourself. Then we can say that you have an experience of remorse. Remorse is paschatap. Okay, and that's a very strong situation where the guilt has transformed itself into something really uneasy, really bad inside you. Okay, so this guilt is the mechanism through which this compass called conscience forces you to do right thing. So how to avoid this uneasy feeling? Okay, to avoid this guilt, person generally tends to not do wrong things, or rather tends to do right things. And in case person, because of these issues, happen to do wrong thing, again there will be guilt. So to come out of guilt, the person needs to correct the behavior, that is apologize or whatever the situation, then only the guilt can go. So this ethical behavior, okay, is regulated through something called guilt. Guilt is that emotion. Okay, and this is all, as we say, this is all happened through the hardwired kind of unchangeable fixed something, and that is called categories of understanding. That is basically categories of our mind, which forces you absolutely to actually follow whatever is right and avoid whatever is wrong. And this particular principle is what Kant actually came with, because of which what happened? All the ethics was centered or made responsible upon the human being themselves. Correct? So, Kant was the person who made the ethics human centric rather than God centric. Now, the responsibility of following it is on you, because, and rather he says it's not about a response, it's like you anyway have to do it, unless you want to go through the uneasy kind of experience of guilt, right? So now that he has established that everything is coming from inside through the categories of understanding, so according to Kant, the ethicality of some behavior, rightness or wrongness of a behavior, is not dependent on anything outside. That is, it is not dependent on what result it will bring in, because it is dependent on you. It is dependent on in something inside, that is category. And that's why his context is, he says, there is a quote, right is right not because it result it results in right consequences, but because it is right, or it is inherently right. So he says this is called deontological approach towards ethics. Why deontological? See, in philosophy, the word ontology is actually talking about existence, basically something external. The chair is existing. If my philosophy is talking about chair, trees, ocean, sun, some reality outside, or some reality that exists, so that is called ontological approach, and that means something external, something existing. A deontological approach means actually not dependent on external thing, but intrinsic thing, internal thing. That's why it is called deontological approach. So basically deontological approach क्या बोलता है? Right and wrong is decided by categorical imperative. Categorical imperative, and this is hardwired for our morality, and this is done by this is all happening because we are people of reason, or we are animal with reason. This is all happening because of reasoning capacity. See? So morality, science, even God is also sourced from reason. That is, we did not create the God did not create us, we created the God. It's not Kant's statement, but that's what exactly Kant actually tried to communicate also. Okay, this is also said in a different way, where Kant says, because there are different expressions. Duty, the concept of duty also like that. The concept of duty itself has some meaning. It is coming from the word due. So something is already due. Like for example, if I have taken 1,000 rupees from you and I had told that I'll give it on today, for example, and both had agreed. So it now when today the money will be due for me to give it to you, and when I give it to you, I'm not doing anything extra for you. Okay, I am just fulfilling my obligation. So this duty, okay, so my process of doing this ethical activity or whatever activity is nothing extra that I'm doing. I'm just following what was agreed, what was already given. So this duty, where you don't expect anything in return. Obviously, by doing itself, you are getting rid of your or fulfilling your obligation. So fulfilling obligation is the thing where you don't expect things from in return, right? That's why the concept of duty itself has a connotation which is coming from due. Okay, so due is kind of you already benefited, already have some things, it is due, so you give it. So concept of duty means concept of something which is inherent, you're not doing anything extra, it's not a bonus, it's not extra, even if it may seem from outside that I feel like I see someone someone in trouble, and if I know, and it is very much evident that if I give the person 1,000 rupees or 500 rupees, the problem will be solved, the person will be in less suffering. So the categorical imperative, this moral obligation, this conscience creates a sense of dueness in me. So this dueness, that is, it's my duty now to help the person. I'm not doing anything favor, and these words doesn't appear in Kant's philosophy. It's a duty, which is fulfilling the obligation, and that obligation is moral obligation. Okay, fulfilling the obligation is a duty, isn't it? So if I am obliged to something, it's like my duty to do it. So that's why duty, the concept of duty, is very important. The word itself conveys everything in Kant. So he says duty for sake of duty. So basically, duty means the same thing, duty for sake of duty. So you do it, sake of duty. So you do it, why? You do it because it is due, not because anything else. So your reason why you're doing it is nothing more than the thing itself, which is coming from inside. So aapka morality is not about outside. It about your inner calling, your inner thing, which anyway uh, forces you to experience some obligation, some imperative, which is coming from categories. That's why it's called categorical imperative. So you feel this categorical imperative, you feel this moral obligation, you feel this sense of duty, and you do it. And once you do it, it's over. You just fulfill your duty, because duty means you don't expect anything in return. So morality lies in that sense of duty. Sense of morality lies in that sense of moral obligation, which is coming from categorical imperative. So here it is called duty for sake of duty. Initially also the concept of duty was anyway there, but the duty towards God, it was said that it's your duty towards God to do right things, to help others. So if you help others, God will be happy. So you do it for God, not for anything else. But here he said, no, it's not God. It is something inside us which creates that obligation, and you do it. Okay. And that's the reason he says that it is not something that you do because of God or anything outside, but because something inside. It's not something about outside. It's not ontological, but it is deontological. And that's why you do it, because it is inside. It is a priori. जैसे एक शब्द मैंने इस्तेमाल किया a priori, वो फिलोसॉफी का शब्द है a priori, मतलब irrespective of the outside experience, it is intrinsic, it is hardwired, it is पहले से ही. ठीक. So duty for sake of duty. Okay, right is right, not because it's result. Yes. So what happened here? if you understand the whole thing, there is a sequence. From philosophy, his metaphysics, his epistemology, he had something to talk about metaphysics, and obviously he is now talking about ethics. So he says, uh, one must act only by that maxim rule by which you can at the same time will it be a universal law. Okay, इसमें आते हैं. तो ड्यूटी फॉर सेक ऑफ ड्यूटी हो गया. तो आप जो भी चीज करते हैं, इट्स कमिंग फ्रॉम इनसाइड, इट इज बीइंग the obligation is being generated inside of you. There is a sense of obligation, you have to do it. If you don't do it, you will go through guilt, that is feeling of uneasiness. वो internal होता है, not coming from God, it's not coming from your nurture, it's not coming from your sanskar or anything. संस्कार मतलब हम normally जिसको संस्कार बोलते हैं, teachings, your teachings and things will decide which compartment the thing will go in. Okay, what he is saying is, like for example, this right and wrong, this sense of right and wrong is hardwired in you. कुछ चीजें राइट में गिर जाएगी, कुछ चीजें रॉन्ग में गिर जाएगी, वो अकॉर्डिंग टू सोसाइटी चेंज हो सकती है, वो ठीक है, ठीक है. And this is not happening because of God. Good thing about this thing is then nobody can misuse actually, because under the name of God, you know how thousand wrong things have been told and people have been following. In fact, if you see today's world, more people are getting killed in the name of God than anything else. That's a clash. That's another story. But point here, he's saying it's not God, it's you. It's just you neglect yourself and contract your morality to God, contract your responsibility or delegate your responsibility to God to make sure that you are, ethical. He says no, it's your own. You just have to follow your own conscience. If you follow your own conscience, you don't need God. And why should you follow your conscience? Because if you don't, you yourself will go through uneasy experiences unnecessary. Okay, so you should, or one must just listen to what conscience has to say, and automatically you will be ethical. If you don't, you will go through some guilt. So basically, this ethicality, this rightness and wrongness, this sense of duty is all coming from our reasoning capacity. That is our reason. Okay, concept, our thinking capacity in a way. And that's why he says every human being has this. So every human being has this means everyone in itself is the source of ethical behavior. तो ये ethical guidance है, ethical जैसे किताब है, जैसे religion में क्या होता है, कोई एक किताब is the source of everything. So that kitab will be considered like a very important thing. People are ready to do all sorts of things to conserve, to save this book, like Quran ho, Bible ho, Gita ho. People go to whatever extent to protect that book because it is considered that it is coming from God, and it also has the source of all knowledge, source of all right and wrong, good and bad. According to Kant, what is the source of good and bad? Every human being is the source of this ethics. Basically, every human being is a source of morality, and that's why you should treat every human being as end in himself or herself. End in herself. Every human being should be treated as end in herself than the means to something else. So, you should not consider human being as means to your own selfish gain, some gain for some God, some, some activities that you do it for God. He says what you're doing basically is you're actually sidelining, degrading the source of morality itself, and that is the human being. So every human being is end in herself because she is the source or he is the source of all ethics and morality, not any book, not any god. Books and gods are created by human being only, that they might be used as a practical day-to-day guidance, but ultimately it is all hardwired, it is all there inside us. So we as a human being basically are intrinsically valuable. Our worth is infinite, our value is infinite. We can, a human being cannot be compared with anything material. It should not, the human being should not be treated like a instrument or material to reach something. The human being should be considered as end in herself, end in itself, end in himself, whichever way you want to call it. So this is the concept through which Kant tries to convey that this ethics, which is basically coming from inside you. So what he says is, whenever you do something, you should do it irrespective of bothering about what consequences it will hold, what consequences it will result into, because the consequences are not in your hand. Rather, you have no capacity to envisage all that. Only capacity which is very inherent in you, that you have, is simple, and that is just to fulfill your moral obligations. Okay, so he says means are more important than ends. Okay, you should do it because it is the right thing to do, period. Whether it will bring out good things, right things, wrong things, bad things, doesn't make sense difference. As long as it is from inside, it is something that has allowed, that has pushed by conscience, it is the thing that you should follow. It may result into anything else, because you have no capacity to envisage, anticipate all the complexities and then bring out some most logical, most predictable, 100% predictable consequence, which you know is right, and then you do right things. That doesn't work according to him. And his thing is, all this value system and everything, individual values you might pick up from the society, it keeps on changing, but the very sense of that picking up, the very sense that ye sahi hai ya galat hai, ye andar se hi aata hai. So every human being has worth, every human being is end in itself. And means are the thing that you should be bothered about, because means will be kind of regulated, guided from inside. Consequences are not guided from inside, because consequences are very much unknown when you do the activity. Consequences to baad mein aayenge. So your thinking will not give you the consequence, as in it will be a good thing or a bad thing or anything of that sort. You should just follow the conscience, because to avoid guilt. And that's why Kant's philosophy is human centric, or Kant's ethics is very much human centric. And he says that आप जो भी चीज करते हो वो इसलिए करते हो because you have a sense of moral obligation which has nothing to do with outside, nothing to do with outside existence. It is the ontological approach. Okay, it is non ontological approach. बाहर पे उसका कोई चीज नहीं है. So morality lies in actions, not in consequences. So when you act, okay, so your action is moral, immoral, ethical, unethical. Consequences can be anything on the basis of all other practical issues that you yourself will not have any capacity to envisage beforehand. So just do the duty for sake of duty. Just do it because without considering the consequence. Just do it only because it is right. It is very much similar to the message that we have in Bhagavad Gita, that is the concept of Nishkama Karma. Nishkama Karma. Kam is generally here your desires or your expectations. What is the Nishkam Karma? What is the shlok, the most famous? It says, Karmanyeva adhikar aste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phala heturbuhu mate सर्वत्र संगणी. बेसिकली क्या बोलते हैं? कर्मण्येव अधिकार. Whatever work, activity, behavior, action that you're doing is the only area of jurisprudence for you. कर्मण्य एव, सिर्फ कर्म ही अधिकार. You have some right over. मा फलेषु, मा means नहीं, फलेषु means fruit, consequence. कदाचन, कभी, कदापि ही नहीं बोलते ना वैसे, never. So you only have jurisprudence, control, or something to do with only and only your actions, and no control, no jurisprudence over the consequences of the action. So basically what they are saying is, if you are trying to hunt a deer, you have complete control over your eyes, your hand movement, your skill, your timing, everything. But you have no control over the movement of the deer or whatever prey or whatever शिकार that you are trying to hit at. ये भी हो सकता है कि आपका निशाना एकदम सही लगा है, सही सेट हुआ है. A microsecond before you leave the arrow, something there where the deer is standing नीचे हिल जाता है, something moves below the legs of deer and it moves itself from that place. What happens? You might have had all the things in front of you, but under control, that your hands and things like that. But ultimately what happens? Ultimately you don't get whatever you expected. That is because आपका कंट्रोल वहां पे खत्म हो गया. Basically निष्काम कर्म means actions without consideration of or expectation is the better word here, because this is more prescriptive of results and fruit. Now ये थोड़ा सा प्रिस्क्रिप्टिव है, स्पिरिचुअल नेचर में है, एथिकल नेचर में नहीं है कि आप, क्योंकि यहां पे भी ये बोला है, if you keep on expecting and then do actions, you yourself will suffer in case the action doesn't get or the expectation do not get fulfilled. ठीक, उस केस में क्या हो जाता है, फिर आप फुलफिल नहीं कर पाए, नहीं करें तो यू विल गो थ्रू अननेसेसरी अनप्लेजेंट एक्सपीरियंस. ये यहाँ का अनप्लेजेंट एक्सपीरियंस जो है वो गिल्ट नहीं है, बिकॉज यहाँ पे मोरली बात नहीं हो रही है, यहाँ पे निष्काम कर्म की बात हो रही है. फॉर योर ओन सेल्फ बेटर डू समथिंग विच इज निष्काम. आई जस्ट ब्रॉट दिस आउट. यस, इट इज पार्ट ऑफ, ये ऐसे क्वेश्चन भी आ सकता है, द कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ निष्काम कर्मा. ओके, कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ fruitless action or action without expectation of fruit, उसका इंपॉर्टेंस क्या है, कैसे है वो, इसके लिए वो है. ठीक, सो बस एक रिलेवेंस बन गया, इसलिए मैंने वहां पे एक्सप्लेन कर दिया. ठीक है. One more aspect of Kant is universality. What is this universality? He says how to consider some action being ethical or unethical. There is a test according to him. Something is ethical or something you should consider ethical or moral if you expect or suggest or recommend is the better one. That behavior to be universal. Expect and recommend. जैसे मान के चलो कि मैं प्रोफेशनल चोर हूं, प्रोफेशनल ठग हूं. Even in that case, I might be actually surviving on, I might be actually fulfilling my livelihood needs through the process of cheating or stealing, basically. Even if in that case, I myself will never expect and recommend that behavior to be universal behavior. Getting the point? So, आप जैसे corruption, even if somebody is doing corruption all his life, he will never expect that someone else should cheat him. Okay, it is very similar to say that treat others the way you want others to treat you. Same is the logic here. So, a moral behavior is a kind of behavior which you expect to be universal behavior. So, अगर वो चीज आप बाकी लोग करें और नॉट जस्ट करें, बाकी लोग को आप एनकरेज करने की इच्छा रखते हैं, तो वो एथिकल बिहेवियर. ठीक, तो ये अपना अगेन व्हाट कांट इज ट्राइंग टू से, कांट इज अगेन, now initially he said that there is a sense of right and wrong and there is a categories and all that. Now he is talking about the detailing, individual behavior. यहाँ पे ये चीज करना, पर्टिकुलर केसेस हम बात कर रहे हैं, जैसे आप रोड पे जा रहे हैं, वहां पे कोई पर्सन इज आस्किंग फॉर फूड, तो वहां पे obviously if I ask you universally what should be the case, you said yes, whoever is capable should help the person. मान के चलो you are also capable, you have enough money and things in your hand, so in that case the ethical behavior for you will be to actually give some money for the person to save his life or whatever situation is. So what happens, it is actually as simple as that, that कोई और से आप जो एक्सपेक्ट करते हैं उस जगह पे वही चीज आप कर लो, बात खत्म. दैट इज एथिकल. देयर इज नो कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी अकॉर्डिंग टू कांट, देयर इज नो कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी. Imagining you sitting at that position, what have you done or what you think everybody should do is an ethical behavior. Do you want everybody should be corrupt or everybody should be honest? Simple question. If you think aram se, take your time and think that which value or which thing should be prevalent in the world, honesty or dishonesty. Without a doubt you will say honesty. That itself shows that honesty is an ethical behavior, and this is the test that you should be telling it to yourself, not to others. It's not about others. Then it becomes enforcement of ethics, not fulfilling the ethics. See, ethics and morality basically are the kind of tools they are developed so that your behavior can be intrinsically regulated, and it's the most easy way to regulate it, because then it will be very close monitored, closely regulated, and 100% times you will follow it. because you yourself believe that way. Okay, it's like you can never imagine person like Bhagat Singh doing anything anti-national, because he from inside is moved. From inside he is heavily patriotic. Sorry. So point is, अगर अंदर से ही है, okay, so ये better है. So whenever the questions like what's the difference between law and ethics comes, you quote Kant in this way. Ki ethics is about internal regulation, ideally the most efficient, most effective, okay, and most smooth for that matter, with lesser possible or no conflict whatsoever outside world. But what happens? Here comes the importance of these passions, desires, and other instinctive aspects of your personality, anger and emotions, which actually shadow that thing to that particular extent. So we have something called law, legal provisions, outside enforcement. Legal provisions outside enforcement can only deliver to the bare minimum. Like, अगर हमेशा देखना, what is law is like a threshold, it's a line, it's a limit. Okay, this is like ethical, more and more ethical, like that behavior. So what law makes sure that the, like for example here it is 0 for example, so law makes sure that the behavior, ethicality of behavior doesn't fall here, so then punishment will be there. So law can ensure that behavior is at least this much ethical. You can clearly draw this diagram. So this is law. So law makes sure that the decision, whatever action you take, doesn't fall below this, because if it falls below this, then there will be a chaos. That's why law and order is always used together, because if there is no law, there won't be order. There will be a chaos, there will be a disorder. But what we are doing in ethics, we are doing in GS4 is to start from here, because assume करें कि इसके नीचे तो कोई गिरेगा नहीं, मान के चलो, but the quality, the aim, the purpose why we are talking about ethics is and all, to have direction towards upward, whichever position you might be now, direction is upward. So ethics is a process. Law in this context is a limit, it's a safety net जिससे नीचे नहीं आप गिर सकते, in case because of heavy influence of anger and passion. Even in that case, because of the fear of your own physical survival, you don't go down. But yes, ethics will always inspire to do more and more ethical things. Now when we say more and more ethical, means less and less self-oriented. Okay, so yes, right and wrong aspect is there, but there is also, when it comes to ethical things, there are, depends on how much sacrifice you do. So on the basis of sacrifice, we do things. So that's why please always try to understand, whenever there is ethics has to be talked, morality has to be talked, it is always first and foremost to be implemented, to be followed inside, to be followed by you, because the very purpose, the very context, the very channel through which ethics can implement itself is from inside. जैसे अगर आप टैबलेट से ठीक होना चाहते हो तो आप उसको खाना ही पड़ेगा। अगर आप इंजेक्शन से, शॉट से ठीक होना चाहते हो तो वो लगाना पड़ेगा। पॉइंट ये है कि ethics is the thing with which you can do only one thing, and that is follow. To prescribe it to others is, yes, maybe you can inspire others to follow, but ethicality is about yourself because it is coming from inside. So whenever you talk about ethics, better talk about how to follow it, how to get rid of the hurdles, how to get rid of the problems that are coming in line. And little digression, but it is very important for our exam point of view because questions may come from that point of view. Like a Maslow's uh, pyramid and all, similar kind of thinking here. But please put your brain into it in what I'm going to say. That this ethics, like now what we already said, that there is this intrinsic force, right, or guidance, right, which forces you to do right thing through mechanism of guilt, a conscience basically. So if that's so clear, why would somebody voluntarily want to go through something unpleasant experience? मुझे पता है कि ये रॉन्ग है, फिर भी मैं क्यों कर लेता हूँ? होता है, लोग करप्शन करते हैं, उनको पता है रॉन्ग है, फिर भी कर लेते हैं. Why? So to regulate obviously any behavior, as we already discussed, there are two mechanisms. One is our external mechanism, right? What is external mechanism? Law, correct. And what is internal mechanism? That is conscience. For time being इसको भूल दो, तो क्योंकि इसका लॉ का क्या होता है? There is a fear and there is a incentive. जो भी है प्रोविजंस एक्सटर्नल, बेसिकली लॉ एक्ट्स ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ फियर. आप अगर आईपीसी देखेंगे, सीआरपीसी देखेंगे और ऑल अदर प्रोविजंस देखेंगे, डोमेस्टिक वायलेंस, एससी एसटी एट्रोसिटी के यूएपीए देखेंगे, प्रिवेंशन ऑफ करप्शन एक्ट देखेंगे, पीसीए देखेंगे, तो वो लॉ है. आप अरेस्ट हो जाएंगे आपके अदरवाइज. सो द पॉइंट इज human being, one aspect of human being that perhaps Kant did not take into consideration, maybe he would have, but that we know what and we can discuss is, उसको बोलते हैं, we always have this basically what at what cost. Basically we always try to maximize pleasantness and minimize unpleasantness. I'm talking about pleasantness of experience and unpleasantness of experience. I'm not narrowing it down to pleasure or happiness or satisfaction. These are individual aspects of that particular. Emotionally है तो happiness आ जाएगा, bodily और otherwise है sensuous है, जैसे खाना अच्छा मिल गया, गाना अच्छा सुनने को मिल गया, वो सब, आंखों को कोई नज़ारा गार्डन अच्छा लग रहा है, तो वो प्लेजर के मोड में आता है. सेटिस्फैक्शन है कि कोई चीज निगेटिव से बाहर आ गया तो सेटिस्फैक्शन है. आई एम नॉट टॉकिंग अबाउट द इंडिविजुअल डिफरेंट वेरिएंट्स ऑफ इट. All these variants can be clubbed together under the name called pleasantness, or rather pleasantness of experience. So everybody would like to maximize pleasantness and minimize unpleasantness. So what happens? There are two ways you can get unpleasantness if you deviate. One is law, one is conscience. Now law is a very crude, straightforward way, or not so refined way. That's why I said crude, because there it is black and white. If you do it, and it will be a almost proportionate or slightly more than the proportionate punishment that you will get. So, like in case you do something to someone in the form of you know mm, killing someone under the influence of anger, or harming someone under the influence of any some other passion, or doing the corruption under the influence of cravings and this thing, what happens that way? The punishment, in case it is proved, is generally very, at least slightly more than that, because then you will be in 10 years, 5 years you will be in jail. That is that is too high for if you compare it with something called you know doing some corruption for maybe 10 lakh rupees or 1 crore rupees, something like that, based on these things situation. Point is, law works as a deterrent here from deviating from unethical behavior, or indulging into unethical behavior. Also, law has some provisions to inspire people to do ethical behavior, some provisions. Okay. But here, cost benefit analysis is what people or minds do. And that sense of benefit, is actually not objective. If you do it objectively, there is no point in doing unethical. We do it very prejudiced way, subjective way. Okay, हमें कुछ समय के लिए लगता है कि ये सब बढ़िया है. Maybe your enjoyment for 5 minutes, enjoyment for half an hour, and you are still ready to go through something. Here, another problem with law is the conviction rate, practical problems, Evidence Act, CRPC, and all many things. So difficult to prove. So if the person have a sense that my crime, my unethical behavior, because unethical behavior law के jurisprudence में तभी आएगा जब वो क्राइम के रूप ले लगा. कुछ छोटे मोटे अनएथिकल बिहेवियर क्राइम के रूप में नहीं पकड़े जाते. तो माय क्राइम अगर वो पकड़ा नहीं जाएगा तो इट विल बी अ ग्रेट एक्सपीरियंस, बिकॉज you already experienced, or you have a plan to experience something pleasantness, you have a plan to maximize pleasantness, but without going through the unpleasant experience that was invariably associated with it. Okay, so human being takes decision on the basis of what? On the basis of this balancing calculation as to whether it is worth to go through this pleasant experience, because there would be pleasant in the sense unethically pleasant experience. We are talking about law here. So, and whatever punishment I may get, whether they are comparable, how much they are comparable. That's why conviction, the certainty, surety of conviction is more important than intensity of punishment. 2 साल की सजा होगी या 10 साल की होगी, उससे फर्क नहीं पड़ता. Even if it is 2 साल, make sure that the person gets convicted in the fastest possible time and gets whatever the due saza for that, even if it is for rape or anything else. तो वो सजा जो है वो कन्विक्शन पे डिपेंड ज्यादा करता है, डिटरेंस, rather than the cruel intensity of the punishment. बट ये तो वैसे लॉ ऐसे काम करता है, और लॉ इसलिए थोड़ा इनइफेक्टिव लग रहा है हमारे यहाँ पे, करप्शन वगैरह ज्यादा है. इसका कारण ये है कि कन्विक्शन की गारंटी नहीं है. इनफैक्ट लोगों को उल्टी गारंटी है कि कन्विक्शन शायद नहीं होगा. एंड ऑल द मोर पॉसिबल इफ यू आर सिटिंग एट अ पावरफुल पोजीशन, लाइक यू योरसेल्फ इज अ गवर्नमेंट सर्वेंट, you are a politician, you are a big business person, you are a wealthy human being, you can manage everybody because everybody has their monetary needs, so you can force them to do whatever you want even if they don't want, and get your work done. So you save your skin in spite of doing the unethical stuff. That's another story. But what about this internal thing? Why this aspect is not working? Why is this conscience aspect is not working? Because here it's not the enforcement, it is intrinsic, as Kant said. वो अंदर से ही होता है. We also know it. So why is conscience not working? There are 2 aspects to it. One is the narrative societal aspect, because as I said, the valuation of something as pleasant unpleasant is also very subjective. छोटी छोटी चीज में भी यू कैन बी वेरी एक्सपीरियंसिंग वेरी मच प्लेजेंटनेस, और बहुत बड़ी बड़ी और बहुत कॉस्टली अफेयर्स को भी आप इतना यू मे नॉट एंजॉय इट, और यू मे नॉट कंसिडर दैट एज अ प्लेजेंटनेस ऑफ एक्सपीरियंस. So this pleasantness is also decided by the narrative of the society, कि क्या चीज को क्या इंपॉर्टेंस देना है, यू नो, टू डू दिस पर्टिकुलर थिंग इज वाओ, इट्स अ ग्रेट अचीवमेंट, दिस सेंस ऑफ अचीवमेंट, सोशल रिकग्निशन, ये सब चीजें यहाँ पे काम करती हैं, तो वो वहां पे चीज मिल जाती है. ऑल्सो इन द सेम वे एथिक्स कितने स्ट्रांग है सोसाइटी के, somebody who is corrupt, उसको सोसाइटी कितना कंडेम करती है, कितना डिस्टेंस करती है खुद से. पनिशमेंट नहीं है ये, जस्ट डिस्टेंस है, इट्स नॉट अ पनिशमेंट. या फिर डिवैल्यू करती है, कंडेम करती है पब्लिकली, और कितना एक्सेप्टेंस है, ये भी एक एथिक्स का एस्पेक्ट है. यहाँ पे कोई लीगल एस्पेक्ट नहीं ला रहे हैं, किसी को पनिश नहीं कर रहे हैं, फिजिकली कोई पनिशमेंट नहीं है या मॉनिटरी और अदरवाइज. यहाँ पे सोसाइटी का उसको रिस्पेक्ट और उसका जो रिकग्निशन है उसमें कमी आती है या नहीं आती. वन. एंड सेकंड, द मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग इज द इनर अंडरस्टैंडिंग, इनर कंस्ट्रक्शन ऑफ द सेंसिबिलिटीज. तो जो वो पर्सन है उसकी जो सेंसिबिलिटीज है वो कितनी रिफाइंड है, वो कितनी एथिकल साइड में है. जैसे किसी एक पर्सन को छोटी सी चीज भी गलती से भी हो गई तो भी बहुत ज्यादा गिल्ट आता है, एंड द पर्सन गोज थ्रू अ लॉट ऑफ गिल्ट, एंड सो दैट वे द पर्सन ट्राइज टू ऑलवेज कीप हिमसेल्फ और हरसेल्फ एथिकल, बिकॉज वो एक्सपीरियंस इज वेरी नेगेटिव फॉर द पर्सन. समबडी जो नॉर्मली हम बोलते हैं कि थिक स्किन वाले लोग होते हैं, जिसको हम बोलते हैं कि पत्थर दिल, एक तरीके से थिक स्किन, जिसकी चमड़ी बहुत मोटी होती है, उनको कुछ फर्क नहीं पड़ता जो बोलते हैं. ये लोगों को क्या होता है, दे somehow suppress or ignore, they cannot remove the guilt, that is for sure, because you know there are experiences like when people go to vipassana or anything self exploration places. I have seen some people, when they are doing meditation for 2-3 days, third fourth day they start crying very very heavily, loudly. So it happened in one of my friend went to the vipassana, and there it happened. The person was criminal, but he could not, he got bail, and case is still running and nothing is happening, he's still living his life. He had murdered someone basically, in the sense some accident, in the accident in the sense fighting में एक दूसरे को मारते समय वो मर गया, इस टाइप का. तो एंड ही वाज नॉट इन जेल, ही समहाउ वो छूट गया था, जो भी है सिस्टम लीगल हमने ऑलरेडी बात किया. But when he person went to Vipassana, he started crying, because then what happened? That guilt which he was somehow suppressing and keeping inside, because of the meditative situations. Because meditation में क्या होता है, ये बाहर की चीजें slowly you just keep it away. एक layers को खोलते जाते हो, खोलते जाते हो, खोलते जाते हो. And then that, guilt, that stinking stuff which was actually layered under things, and he was not experiencing much guilt on daily basis, started feeling a huge guilt and started crying. The point is, now we are able to suppress the guilt, we are able to keep the guilt away. That is because we have layered these things with something else. We have kind of controlled these things with something else. Correct? तो हम क्या कर रहे हैं, ये चीजें को बहुत सारी बाकी चीजों से वो उसको लेयर करके रख रहे हैं, ब्रशिंग अंडर द कार्पेट जिसको बोलते हैं, वो कर रहे हैं. इफ यू अलाउड योरसेल्फ टाइम, automatically nobody is giving you any discourse, nobody is bombarding with something, nobody is holding you ransom, nobody is putting gun on your head, no enforcement. From inside, that sense of guilt becomes very strong. इसीलिए बोलते हैं कि if you meditate, the whole society if meditates, most likely chance that the person becomes ethical. Okay, that's why Buddha's compassion is not emotional compassion. Buddha's compassion is not prescriptive ethics. Buddha is not saying, Buddha never said be compassionate. Buddha said yes, there are some 5 that will come through. Okay. सो 5 जो वाउज है या वाउज नहीं बोल सकते बट 5 शील है, पंचशील जिसको बोलते हैं, वो फॉलो करा वो करो वो बोलते हैं. बट बुद्धा नेवर सेज बी कंपैशनेट, he says you will be compassionate. Compassionate will flow from you anyway if you do the meditation, if you know yourself, you explore yourself. So if you are developing on a spiritual level, if you are doing meditation, if you are giving yourself time, if you are reflecting upon your own behaviors, it is going to happen that you develop this compassion and ethical behavior and things like that. So what happens is you can be ethical if you allow your conscience to play some role there. You cannot suppress it, you cannot subside it, and then expect that you will be internally kind of regulated. So, and this is, as Kant said, sorry, this is, at Kant said, is intrinsic. And if you club it with our spiritual traditions, take it Buddha or yoga or whatever, there it fits in. So if you allow your conscience to get developed, so what we want is, we want people with a better and well developed, well established conscience into them. We don't want law abiding people. Anyway, see, in the graph that we discussed previously, if person's ethicality is here, very unlikely that he will come down. Yes, there will be things always pulling him down, passions and things, but if it is very high, he will at the max come here or here. Very unlikely here. If somebody is here, very likely that he will come down to here. So even if to have very law abiding society, it's better to have well developed conscience into the society which will benefit everyone. Now जो चीज पे हम अभी बात कर रहे हैं वो बहुत ज्यादा रिलेवेंट है, तो क्वेश्चन ऐसे इसी कंटेक्स्ट में बहुत आ सकते हैं कि ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है, तो एथिक्स का इंपॉर्टेंस नीचे क्यों जा रहा है, बिकॉज समवेयर द लाइफ इज बिकमिंग ट्रांजैक्शनल. So people are not exposed to the other versions of pleasantness of experience except the pleasantness that they derive from material things. Okay, so their point is, or there are people, okay, that they believe that materialism is the only way you can enjoy or you can experience the pleasantness inside, and because of which, because they have no exposure to non-material pleasantness of experiences that you get through intellectual experiences, pleasantness, then spiritual pleasantness. Okay, तो ये चीजें जो हैं, ये चीजें जब तक एस्टेब्लिश नहीं होती, और दैट्स द रीजन वी आर बिकमिंग मोर एंड मोर ट्रांजैक्शनल. दैट इज, if somebody is losing something, money or whatever, he or she will certainly ask in material way, what is it that I am going to get from this? मुझे इससे क्या मिलेगा? That is materially क्या मिलेगा? Because that's the only way that I know I can experience pleasantness. That's the only way I can experience emotion, like happiness, pleasantness, happiness, pleasure, satisfaction, things like that. तो मटेरियल चीजों के पीछे जाना एक अपने आप में एथिक्स को नीचे करने की ये है. बट वन वे is to enforce law, but as this is a democracy, so our political leaders and also the law implementers, both are coming from the same society. They are not coming from somewhere else. So जैसे सोसाइटी होगी वैसे ही हमें लीडर्स मिलते हैं। ये फेमस कोट है, ये भी हमारे एज इट इज भी आ सकता है। द नेशन गेट्स द पॉलिटिशियंस और लीडर्स दैट दे डिजर्व। तो हमारी सोसाइटी ही करप्ट है। सी, इट्स नॉट दैट पॉलिटिशियंस आर करप्ट, and it's not starting from politician, it's a circle, it's a vicious circle. To say that politicians are corrupt and hence we are corrupt, okay, for I understand that to reverse this vicious cycle into virtuous cycle, we have to start from somewhere, and the most practically possible start from some establishment, some institute, some physical thing, rather than general public. So yes, I completely understand that, and it is politicians, and because we have a mechanism where we can actually hold them accountable. We cannot hold all society accountable themselves. So we have politicians, then we expect that they are, you know, more or less corrupt, so automatically they will stop corruption. Okay, then again, there will be lesser corruption in the society, then again the society will choose less corrupt people. Like that the system will run. But point what I'm saying is, the ethical aspect is very, very important in a democracy to be made public. And this is, in that context, this is really a good move by UPSC and all that, because as we discussed in our first lecture also, for you to appreciate something, you need to have some awareness about it. You need to have some acquaintance with it. You need to have some knowledge of it. जब तक आपने कभी मैथ्स पढ़ा ही नहीं है, तो आपको मैथ्स के प्रति अट्रैक्शन कैसे डेवलप हो? Okay, you have never exposed to something called physics, for example, or you're not exposed to music, you're not exposed to some instrument, bansuri for a flute for that matter. How would you appreciate it? So first you need to be exposed to these things. There is something called theories. This is the way things are going to impact. These are the things that are happening anyway in the field. This can be done this way, that can be done that way. Then at least you start knowing it, start recognizing it, start appreciating it, start admiring it, and perhaps start following it. That is the reason we are studying ethics. That is the reason we are studying morality in our GS4. And it is always, again, it can be considered as a good plan to have similar things in other aspects, that is other parts of education system. So as far as what I understand is, this ethics and morality, Indian and Western and otherwise, as a matter of theories, its concept should be there at every level. There should be, like we have, wherever you go, if you might have seen, wherever you go, there is a paper of English always. There is a paper of basic maths, at least almost everywhere. There is a paper of this basic science, unless you go to the non-scientific field. But ethics, what we can say, and this can be a suggestion also in our answers, that ethics should be taught at different levels. Everybody, at whichever exam you are giving, there is a paper of ethics, has to be. There is a paper of logic, aptitude, basic has to be, not mathematics wala logic, simple logic. There has to be a paper of English, generally wo hota hi hai har jagah. Any exam you give, there has to be a paper of ethics. And in fact, I would go to the extent of saying that there has to be a paper of religion, to know, just to know very simple thing, basic facts of every religion, that are at least whatever syllabus we have for this, people do for MA in religious philosophy, MA in religious theology, whatever, we can develop some uniform this thing. So we have to bring in these aspects now, that the way history, geography, polity, economy, mathematics, basic science, English, our language like Hindi, Marathi, Tamil, whichever way, In the same way, ethics has to be also made public, and at all level, including, like for example, if somebody is putting a paper, somebody is submitting a paper on something for her PhD, for that exam, even net exam, UGC नेट एग्जाम, एवरीवेयर देयर हैज टू बी वन पेपर ऑफ एथिक्स। ये चीज हम अपने आंसर में भी लिख सकते हैं, इसको एलाबोरेट कर सकते हैं। क्यों? क्योंकि हमारा कंटेक्स्ट पूरा ये है कि एटलीस्ट सी वी आर नॉट सेइंग दैट एथिक्स पढ़ के सब एथिकल हो जाएंगे, बिल्कुल नहीं, कोई पॉइंट ही नहीं है। एंड इतना डायरेक्ट तो कनेक्शन 0.1 भी नहीं हो सकता इन जनरल पब्लिक की अगर बात करें, क्योंकि सोसाइटी तो ऐसी ही है। बट स्टिल एटलीस्ट सम टर्म्स, इवन इफ इट स्टार्ट्स फ्लोटिंग, कॉन्शियंस, गिल्ट, इंटेग्रिटी, एटलीस्ट ये चीजों की बात तो शुरू हो जाएगी। एंड इफ एवरीबडी इज स्टडिंग अबाउट इट, देयर वुड बी kind of a lot of interest in also. And ethics, and obviously like we have this half question paper is that of basic of ethics, human values, गांधी जी ने क्या बोला, विवेकानंद ने क्या बोला, अंबेडकर ने क्या बोला, कांट ने क्या बोला, वो सब चीज, रिलीजन कैसे इम्पैक्ट करता है, एजुकेशन इंस्टीट्यूट कैसे इम्पैक्ट करता है, वगैरह वगैरह। एंड सेकंड इज एडमिनिस्ट्रेशन में कैसे सिटीजन चार्टर क्या होता है, अकाउंटेबिलिटी मैकेनिज्म्स क्या होता है, सोशल ऑडिट क्या होता है, इंटरनेशनल एथिक्स क्या होता है, करप्शन क्या होता है, ओके, फंड कैसे क्या चलता है। तो ये सब चीज में इन द सेम वे एनी पेपर यू आर गोइंग गिविंग, देयर हैज टू बी अ पेपर ऑफ एथिक्स ऑफ दैट फील्ड, लाइक मेडिकल एथिक्स, इंजीनियरिंग एथिक्स, ओके, लीगल और लॉयर्स एथिक्स, okay, teaching ethics. So there are some ethical principles that we can develop, and we can source it from any, like western literature, Indian literature, other literature, जो भी अच्छी चीज है उसमें वो डाल के उसको प्रोपोगेट करना चाहिए। ये चीज आप एज अ मैटर ऑफ आंसर भी लिख सकते हैं, ये चीज आप इंटरव्यू में भी बोल सकते हैं पक्का, बट मेक श्योर दैट यू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट यू आर टॉकिंग अबाउट एंड व्हाई। डोंट क्लेम दैट इससे एथिकल हो जाएंगे, but first we have to establish that along with law, how important it is to be having this ethical narrative into the society. सोसाइटी को ज्यादा से ज्यादा एथिकल आप कैसे बना सकते हैं, क्योंकि बिना नैरेटिव सोसाइटी एथिकल बनना मुश्किल है। इस चीज को एक्सप्लेन करने के लिए वो हम चीज बोल रहे हैं कि एथिक्स जो है वो हर जगह पढ़ाना चाहिए, हर जगह उसका पेपर होना। एंड आपको पता है जब तक पेपर नहीं है लोग पढ़ेंगे नहीं। तो ये हो सकता है, लाइक दिस, आई थिंक दिस कॉन्सेप्ट एटलीस्ट टिल यू गेट सिलेक्टेड, यू शुड नॉट होल्ड विथ यू दैट एथिक्स के पेपर से थोड़ी कोई एथिकल हो जाता है। या फिर सम पीपल आल्सो से दैट जिसको एथिक्स में मार्क्स आए हैं वो एथिकल थोड़ी है। एब्सोल्युटली कोई बोल भी नहीं रहा है कि जिसको एथिक्स में बहुत ज्यादा मार्क्स आए हैं वो एथिकल पर्सन है। दिस इज नॉट टेस्ट ऑफ योर एथिकलिटी, दिस इज द टेस्ट ऑफ योर अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ एथिक्स। And when we say understanding, it is only intellectual in nature. You understand these things. You may not follow. Like for example, you understand that green leaf bhojan mein har roz hona chahiye. Like you need to have green leaf every day in this thing because iron hota hai and all that. But you don't follow it. But at least you know it. Knowing itself is initiation. ये जो concept जो अभी हम बोल रहे हैं कि this kind of understanding of things is very pragmatic understanding, and it's very, very important, and you should actually have this kind of perspective in many aspects of your answers, be it in mains or interview, that anything that you do, we should not expect that to be either 0 or 1. That is, if there is an ethics paper, everybody should be ethical. Don't expect that. That does not also mean that being ethics paper there has no impact whatsoever, and some people also wrongly so goes to the extent of saying that having this paper is detrimental. I do not agree at all, because it will not be detrimental, because not everything can be seen, not everything is everything happens in a very crude and very visible way. Some things happen in very subtle way, and that subtle way is what very important that we have to go with. So this, any spiritual techniques, be it yoga, be it vipassana, irreligious, wahan pe religious, we are not here to train people to practice their religion. No, either we'll bring in intellectual understanding of the real religion through culture and all, and we can give some non-religious spiritual techniques to them. Okay, like Hatha Yoga, asanas, vipassana, sudarshan kriya, isha kriya, whichever way, where there is no religion per se, there is no need of God. You just focus on your breath. That's it. Who asked you to go for God? Don't believe anything. That we can do. Very well do. This much assertiveness in your answer with that much clarity that we are talking about now is not going to be doubted or not going to be contested by the evaluator also. It will be appreciated even in the interview. So ये जो aspects हैं, somewhere we have to bring in our life. Otherwise, what has happened? We have had predominantly science, maths, English, that too employment related education, which was okay, that was the need. But what happened because of that? Employment means what? The ultimate aim is to earn money, which is also okay. But problem is, then we are not educating people, we are just training them. There is a difference between training and education. We don't educate circus tigers, we train them, because we cannot educate them. For education, there has to be a inherent reasoning capacity in that particular animal, which is there in the human being. So education and training are different. Training is when you are you are made to follow something like a robot. So yes, in training there are things that you are required to do on your own, but still training is not intended at making you holistically ethical and moral and efficient and all the personal aspects. No. But when you talk about education, especially the basic education, it is about your overall development towards making you the very ethical, optimistic, inclusive, scientific citizen of India or whichever nation. So this aspect also we can mention. This aspects also can be explored more into, because कुछ questions ऐसे आएंगे जिसमें आपको यही चीजें अच्छे से लिखनी पड़ेगी, उसमें कोई तो innovation होना चाहिए. Because I'll tell you, there are some questions where you are actually required to bring in your own insights into things. It is expected that आप खुद भी कुछ सोचते हो for the society, for the things, and आप वो चीज आर्टिकुलेट भी करना जानते हो, बिकॉज वो आंसर राइटिंग भी तो होनी चाहिए. सिर्फ अच्छा होके फायदा नहीं होता. यू हैव टू हैव आंसर राइटिंग. Then it would be certainly appreciated, not all questions, but especially the first half of ethics that you are discussing with me includes these kind of things. And it is always advisable to bring in your own points. For that you need to have some ability to think on your own. Ethics में जो मेरा वाला हाफ है, फर्स्ट हाफ है, उसमें तो मतलब अच्छे खासे ये क्वेश्चंस आते हैं और ये हमेशा अप्रिशिएट होते हैं. वहां पे भी लोग किताब जैसा कहीं और से कॉपी करके चिपका के आते हैं. समटाइम्स यस, एग्जांपल्स चिपकाओ, कोई इशू नहीं है, बट आपका पॉइंट में कुछ तो एक न्यूनेस होना चाहिए, ओरिजिनलिटी होनी चाहिए, यूनिकनेस होना चाहिए, तो अच्छे मार्क्स आने के लिए. You need to think on your own, because your experience would be different, even if slightly, but it is different than somebody else's experience, isn't it? So, and why don't you encash that? Answer writing में बहुत important है ये चीज, that you bring in your own points. Like for example, in last lecture we talked about this quote that was there in the UPSC paper also, that is, an unexamined life is not worth living. इसमें बहुत सारी चीजें हम डाल सकते हैं. इनफैक्ट जिस कंटेक्स्ट पे अभी हमने बात की उसको कनेक्ट करके कि आज की सोसाइटी को और एथिकल बनाने के लिए क्या किया जा सकता है, ऑल दैट, एंड कनेक्टेड टू एवरीबडी एग्जामिनिंग देयर लाइफ, ये बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट चीज हो जाएगी. तो ये वाला जो एस्पेक्ट है जो अभी हमने बात किया कि प्रैक्टिकल सॉल्यूशन, वन थिंग इज वेरी क्लियर फॉर आवर एथिक्स पेपर एंड फॉर यू एज एन एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर, आपकी फिलोसॉफी, थॉट प्रोसेस, नैरेटिव, अंडरस्टैंडिंग वो एक जगह है which is very very important, but and that's a very good start, but it should not stop there. You need to have something concrete suggestion for others to follow. जैसे हमने बोला कि सबको एथिकल होना चाहिए, सिर्फ लॉ से काम नहीं चलेगा, एवरीबडी नोज दैट, बट व्हाट्स योर सजेशन, whether it is implementable now, implementable after 5 years, but some implementable suggestion आपका क्या है? जैसे हमने बोला ये वाला पेपर इंट्रोड्यूस करो, उसका एक प्रॉपर सिलेबस एस्टैब्लिश करो. इनफैक्ट इन इंडिया वी नीड टू ब्रिंग इन इंडियन एस्पेक्ट इनटू इट. वेस्टर्न भी पढ़िए, जैसे इंडियन फिलोसॉफी तो हम पढ़ते ही हैं. इंडियन फिलोसॉफी में एथिक्स का जो अपना बीए एमए कुछ होगा उसमें भी पढ़ते होंगे. इंडियन इथोस, इंडियन एथिकल सिस्टम्स, ठीक है, उसमें जैसे चीजें हैं कुछ कुछ. रिलीजियस एस्पेक्ट को वीड आउट करके और उसको फिल्टर आउट करके सिर्फ सेक्युलर एस्पेक्ट को, नॉन रिलीजियस एस्पेक्ट को, बिकॉज मोरालिटी कैन बी विदाउट रिलीजन. वी ऑलरेडी डिस्कस दैट मोरालिटी एंड रिलीजन कोई बहुत इंटीमेटली कनेक्टेड नहीं है. If you want to connect it, because religion means faith. So if morality, or rather faith in supernatural, basically, that is religion in this context. There are many aspects to religion also, that faith is propagated by some ritual and things like that, but is faith in supernatural thing, if that's the source of, that is the source, or sorry, that particular thing is considered to be source of ethical and moral values and behaviors, then we can say that the morality is coming from religion, and it is okay. Like if you are Buddhist, you will be non-vegetarian. You are Jain, if you are then you will be non-vegetarian, because you believe in ahimsa. So you don't want to kill animals. In fact, जितना possible practically हो सके उतना, which is a really commendable thing. And by the way, everybody else follows it. Like हम बोलते हैं ना कि to the extent, like Jains will say that we normal Jain people, like जो गृहस्थ लोग हैं, they will say that obviously they will not kill any animal. Obviously they will not eat, kill. Then they will also perhaps make sure that they will not eat something which is below surface of the earth, because वहां पे भी बहुत फिर वो मर जाते हैं चीजें, ऐसे माना जाता है. तो जितना हो सके, लेकिन जिंदा भी रहना है तो फिर ऊपर का खा सकते हैं. सो थोड़ा एडजस्टमेंट कर दिया, बट स्टिल द स्पिरिट ऑफ द आइडिया इज हैज टू बी रिस्पेक्टेड हियर. दे आर ट्राइंग देयर बेस्ट टू अवॉइड एनी किलिंग, अहिंसा. उसमें भी जो और स्पिरिचुअली आगे निकल जाते हैं, जो मुनि बन जाते हैं, वो दे विल मेक श्योर दैट कि उनकी मुंह से जो हवा निकल रही है उससे भी कोई ऑर्गेनिजम्स ना मरे. जस्ट इमेजिन so much of ahimsa strictly followed. It is a really appreciable thing. There is nothing wrong about it, because the person, this is the most ethical thing, isn't it? The person is doing it with so much of inconvenience, so much of sacrifice, so much of maybe spiritual realization, so much of height, ethical height the person has achieved. Then only the person can do it. But others also, like we also say that we we eat only one or two animals, that too because of habit, but we'll make sure that others, जैसे हम राह चलते किसी को भी नहीं मारते, even if it is dog, हम we even if there is a मुर्गी there, that is a hen or chicken, even if you might be eating chicken, you will not kill it just like that. So your ahimsa is still there. There has to be reconciliation happening, that you still you are okay with the thing as a matter of food, in the pictorial version of being food, rather than some animal suffering for because of death or suffering for life. तो वो तो हम वैसे भी नहीं. कुछ लोग ऐसे हैं कि that कुछ लोग ऐसे नॉनवेज खा सकते हैं लेकिन किसी को मारते हुए देख नहीं सकते. तो वो अलग अलग टाइप्स है. पॉइंट आई एम सेइंग इज कि किसी भी चीज का स्पिरिट को हमेशा रिस्पेक्ट करना चाहिए. इन दैट कंटेक्स्ट जो अहिंसा का कंसेप्ट है, उसके थ्रू जो वेजिटेरियनिज्म जैनिज्म में है, ये रिस्पेक्टेबल चीज है. तो उस कंटेक्स्ट में देखा जाए तो जैन अगर अंडरस्टैंडिंग उसकी प्रॉपर हो रिलीजन की भी, वो कॉलेज में ही मिले, स्कूल में ही मिले, फिलोसॉफी उसका एथिक्स की भी जानकारी हो, तो ये पक्का होगा कि इफ somebody is Jain by birth and have been following Jainism by birth also, certainly will not kill any animal and certainly will not kill any human being also. Because if the clarity is there, now sometimes what happens, you just see that you don't kill animals, organisms, you put this thing normal grahast Jain, I'm saying. But if he is not made very clear with the whole ethical system, maybe he will not appreciate or he will do something wrong with respect to human being or some other animal and follow that. So that is a kind of misfit. But that misfit is not happening because the person is wrong. Misfit is happening because he is not being communicated with properly the understanding of why somebody wears that thing, why somebody follows that principle of non-killing. Okay, so coming back to the point that we can have this concept of ethics being implemented, ethics being taught properly the way we are doing it, at least. And I'm sure, you might be at denial mode, whatever. I'm pretty sure, I'm 100% sure rather, that the kind of sensitivity that you had before you started your ethics, and whichever wherever you might have read it, you might have done the classes or whatever, and you will have at the end of maybe first mains that you will write, you study more because mains ke liye hum zyada padhte hain, right? After that, some sensitivity will be developed in you, some this imperative on you will work more forcefully, this categorical imperative work more forcefully on you than it was before. Okay, one more just concept of Kant, this concept of goodwill. Now goodwill is again, it's a, हम बोलते हैं ना goodwill, but it is called goodwill means his point is, his statement actually says goodwill cannot be misused. ये quote ही है उसका एक तरीके से. What they are saying is, if you have a goodwill for someone, okay, you will not be able to do anything unethical through that goodwill to someone, because goodwill inherently value neutral नहीं है. Goodwill is inherently positive. Inherently positive है. तो गुडविल का क्या मतलब होता है? गुडविल का मतलब होता है your wish and expectation towards well-being of other. इसको गुडविल बोलते हैं. तो कांट ने बोला है कि गुडविल कैनॉट बी मिसयूज्ड. So if you have a goodwill, you can never harm someone for anything, because reason being, आपका जो will है वो positive है for the person. Okay, what you are expecting for the person is more positive side. That's why you cannot misuse the goodwill. Example ले लो that आप किसी को भी प्रति अगर ethical कुछ चाहते हो कि उसका अच्छा हो, and you have no grudge or anything against, and उसके थ्रू आप जो भी करोगे, right, with proper understanding obviously, you will contribute to the betterment of the person only. You cannot harm the person if you have a goodwill, and this goodwill is coming from, again, what? Your categories of understanding or categorical imperative, or we can say it is coming from categories of understanding. This is coming from categories of understanding, na? Or this is otherwise it is coming from, or we can also say that it is coming from the reason. So, and यहाँ पे one more point, अगर reason is generally gets shadowed by or conflicted by, usually often your passions, because passions are not reasonable all the time, every time. So there is a fight always happening between reason and passion. But what Kant says is, if you stick to the reason proper, you can never be unethical. Okay, his point is, if you stick to the reason proper, or you are predominantly a reasonable human being, आपका सेंस ऑफ गिल्ट बहुत स्ट्रांग होगा, एंड सेंस ऑफ गिल्ट अगर स्ट्रांग होगा, आप वो चीज ये नहीं कर सकते, आप उसको डेविएट नहीं कर सकते. So you will not be able to get into or indulge into anything unethical. Okay, तो इसलिए वो बोलते हैं कि रीजन से अगर काम करेंगे, इफ यू डू वर्क अकॉर्डिंग टू रीजन, यू आर मोस्ट लाइकली टू बी एथिकल. तो कांट का पूरा लॉजिक रीजन के इससे बोला, बिकॉज ही स्टडीड और he he brought in the concept of this like his epistemology is basically talking about our faculties of mind and how they are the ones who are responsible for whatever knowledge we have, whatever judgments we have, which also includes our understanding of ethics, our following of ethics. And this is not just understanding, because he says if you are following reasons alone, you will be the most ethical, most rational person, most objective person, most desirable person. Okay, except where emotions are important, like जहाँ पे emotions आपके दोस्त, आपके बाकी चीजें, वहाँ पे emotions आपके चाहिए होंगे. But when it comes to ethical aspect, professional life, public life, most reasonable and rational being, human being is considered most desirable. सोसाइटी उसी को पसंद ज्यादा करेगी, आप खुद भी उस पर सोचेंगे, एक्सेप्ट एज आई सेड प्लेसेस वेयर इमोशनल एस्पेक्ट इज आल्सो इंपॉर्टेंट. ओके, सो जहां पे भी कोई भी डीलिंग होगी, जहां पे भी आपका कोई भी इंटरेक्शन होगा, वहां पे वो चीज रीजन को ही माना जाए. ठीक है, सो ये हो गया उनका कॉन्सेप्ट ऑफ गुडविल. सो and if in to some extent you can say Gandhi was a Kantian in this way. Okay, because बहुत सारी चीजें उन्होंने a goodwill is good is willing alone, तो वो चीज है कि गांधी जी ने गांधी जी also said that whatever Kant is saying is having a huge impact on him. Okay, so that's all for Kant today. We will discuss in the next lecture about other thinkers, which includes the next utilitarian point of view of ethics, where they say that ethics is about consequences, not about some means. Means तो ठीक है, ends important है. अगर अच्छा चीज हो रहा है तो वो अच्छा है, अगर दाग लगने से कुछ अच्छा हो रहा है तो दाग अच्छे हैं. मीन्स इवन इफ इट इज डर्ट, इट इज गुड बिकॉज इट इज डूइंग समथिंग गुड. वो तो चलो ऐड है, मुद्दा ये है कि मीन्स आर, दे आर जस्ट मीन्स, एंड इज व्हाट इज इंपॉर्टेंट. एनीवे, और बाकी इंडियन वगैरह बाकी भी लोग हैं, वो हम इसमें आगे वाले आने वाले लेक्चर्स में देखेंगे. थैंक यू वेरी मच.